Well, good evening, everybody. And as you can see, we're all here, present and correct, and on time, which is typical for some of us. Maybe not so typical for some others. But anyway, good evening. Welcome. First of all, ladies first. Welcome, Linda.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. And yourself?
Well, yes, it's been pretty hard work. I was gigging Christmas Day, I was gigging New Year's Day and New Year's Eve, so it's been a few long nights and hard work. Yeah. And Andrew, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. How you doing?
Well, like I said, it's been a bit chaotic the last few days, but anyway, traveling here and there and everywhere, and trying to do a YouTube career,
Yep.
So,
make that money.
Well, that's right. Yeah, all of 22 cents so far. So yeah, the joys of being monetized and up to 1,000 subscribers. It's
hard work pays off, huh?
That's right.
Well, I don't know about that. It was like when I did my very first video. It didn't matter if one person watched it or 10 people or however many. I just wanted it there as a record that I put on video of my thoughts on the case in general and my conversations with somebody who I would describe as the ultimate guilter. We hear from him a couple of times in Making a Murderer. He's excellent fun to listen to, excellent fun to make fun of. Of course, the former now retired sheriff of Manitowoc, Robert Herman. Coming to you, Andrew, first, you were telling me that you've had one or two encounters with the guilters of the guilter community. Would you like to share any thoughts on any of them? You mentioned one of them had a few complimentary words about me.
Yeah, one of them loved you particularly. I told him I was coming on your channel a while ago before I joined this live stream, and I invited them all to come check your channel out and subscribe. I'm not sure how many will, but
listen, it's brilliant.
Bring it up.
For sure, one of the subscribers to my channel has to be Charles Darwin, because for him to be there at the video so quickly. And that's Ken Kratz. Ken Kratz is Charles Darwin. You can tell by the way he talks. You can tell by, for example, his how he asks certain questions. And if you ask him a question, he will always forget about what you've asked, and he will ask his own question. But yeah, they are they're out there. And Linda, have you had much encounter with the wonderful world of guilters?
I am so fortunate. I really have not had any problems. The only one I ever talked to was Lexus Gold, and we know that to be KK's wife.
All right.
And that was really, really a brief encounter. When I started showing some facts, she just blocked me. And I've been blocked by Ken on Twitter, so I guess, I've just joined the crowd of being blocked. And that's okay. It really is. Because you're not going to get anywhere with these people anyway. No matter what you say. I mean, you could present them a murder on film, and these people are going to say, that's wrong. There's something wrong with that. So I haven't had too much problem with them. I've been fortunate. So, hey, that's not an invitation to come start swamping on me either. But, if you're there, if you do, I'm ready for you. I don't teach you.
Do you not meet Andrew and I could create some fictitious accounts, and we could come on your channel as guilters, just so that you don't feel like you're missing out.
Well, yeah, so I could have some practice. I don't mind. You know what I'm saying? Stock me up. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Mr. Paul, I put a picture of my truck key that I use every day and my spare truck key, which the two keys look totally different. The one I use every day is worn. You can see in the cracks and crevices, you can see the dirt and oil, sweat and stuff in them, and you can see the wear marks on the metal, and the other one looks completely brand new.
Yeah.
Well, that started a shitstorm in the group that I posted that in, and I bet you would love to hear the theories of how Teresa Halbach's DNA was nowhere to be found on the key, but yet Stephen Avery's was. And one of them actually told me that Stephen washed the key to get his blood off of it, and that's why her DNA wasn't on it. And I said, well, why would he wash the key and then put his DNA back on the key? It don't make any sense. I mean, these people are crazy. I would love to get them on your channel and let you have a field day with them.
I was going to wash the key and then leave blood everywhere else, right?
Yeah,
and
everywhere else. Don't clean up.
And just his, his. Like he cleaned the trailer, 5 days to do it. And they cleaned up everything, left the dirt and left some DNA of him and Jody. But there is no, that's a miracle. That guy could make $1 million. What's he doing sitting in jail? That sucker could work for the cops, man. They should let him have the job. Yeah. He could clean that stuff up.
What's really fascinating, though, is why would guilters try and defend an item of evidence that is clearly so corrupt that Ken Kratz, in his summing up, said, so what if the key was planted?
Right.
So why are they even bothering trying to defend what even Ken Kratz admits is bogus?
Because then it makes them think. It makes them think outside of what they want to believe.
Yeah. Right. I remember the exact conversation I had with Sheriff Herman over the key. And he said, well, you do realize, he started off by saying, I know you're not going to believe this. And I said, well, whatever you're going to say, Robert, you're clearly embarrassed about it. He said, but, there was, although there were these 7 searches of of Stephen's bedroom, 3 of them were only cursory 10-minute sweeps of the bedroom. They weren't all long 2.5, 3 hour searches. I said, yes, but Robert, 3 of them were. Andrew Colburn spent an hour searching that cabinet. He would know every single staple, every single nail that's in that cabinet. If you have imagine spending an hour. Imagine even spending half an hour just staring at a wooden cabinet.
And sitting on the bed that was supposedly, slashed and poked and cut hair and all that. They're sitting right on that bed. That's supposed to have DNA on it.
Yeah. No. Okay. If he sat on there and had a glance through, apparently there was pornography on there, which made him so annoyed that he then threw everything back into the cabinet. But I would still ask, these are specialist investigators. They were brought in from Manitowoc County because they've not got the level of competence within Calumet County to come in and do an investigation and to search that bedroom. So they got, as John Farrack describes them in his book, they are the crackerjack Manitowoc detectives, right? What I want to know is who trained Andy Colburn to be so rough with a cabinet that he ends up breaking an item of evidence. It didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Right. It didn't happen.
He can say what he likes, but as I say, the bottom line is, even Ken Kratz, if you can put aside the fact that the key was planted. Problem is, you put aside, you accept one of them,
then
you have to be able to accept that all of the stuff was planted. It's a little bit like Tom Fassbender when it came to that interview on Dr. Phil, when Dr. Phil actually asked him straight out, so you actually think then, to Tom Fassbender and Ken Kratz, do you actually think that Brendan did all of this raping and stabbing and throat slitting and shooting and stabbing and, cutting her hair? You think he actually did all this? And Tom Fassbender says, well, do I think he did all of it? No. Well, if you've got doubts of some of that, what bits do you know that he did do? What bits do you know that he didn't do? What bits do you know?
Yeah.
You just don't know because for one thing, I don't know if you've been watching that Confession Killers thing.
I've seen it a lot of times.
There's a great line in episode 5 where that investigator is looking at the interview of Henry Lee Lucas and saying, that's not what an interrogator does. This is not what a confession is. An interrogator should shut up, and the confession should come from the person being interrogated, and then you corroborate it.
Right.
It's not rocket science. I'm sure we can all agree on that, you know.
Yeah,
So if they do more of investigating what the person said and making sure that the evidence matched the words, we wouldn't have the problem we have, you know, but they don't. They just, okay, well, especially in Confession Killer, they don't, you know, match up what he's saying outside of where the bodies are placed that he can go to. And then he's seen a map on that anyway, you know, I mean, but still they don't. In Brennan's case, there was absolutely nothing except for the magic bullet right after he said it, you know, I mean, but there's also circumstances that go with that. The gun was tested 3 days before that. Where was the gun held? I guess Fassbender held that. I mean, you know, I mean, there's some circumstances that aren't so great with that, but they, in general, if they would not allow any confession without evidence to back it, we would not have false confessions.
Yeah. For me, the whole point is that the idea of framing somebody is you make the evidence try and look as if somebody did it. That's the whole point of framing somebody, you know. And even people as incompetent as the Manitou Sheriff's Department, you know, given the opportunity, given a week to spend at the salvage yard, were able to concoct certain bits of fabricated evidence. You know, 4 months later, they go back to the garage and find bullet fragments that were not there. They weren't there the first time round. And anyway, sorry, Andrew, who was it that described me as being a pompous something or other?
I think his name was Boston Brett. He's in the community Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey, Innocent or Guilty group on Facebook.
Well, I'm highly touched that there's another guilter out there that is so impressed with my work that he's obviously tuned in.
He must have. He
have.
knew you immediately.
You know, I hope he's hit subscribe. I hope he's hit the like button or the dislike button, because it doesn't matter. Yeah. The more likes or dislikes you get, the more attention you get on YouTube, you know. Yeah.
If they're speaking about you, hey, you must be doing something.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like, you know, as far as insults are concerned, as I've said many a time, I've had far worse off Eric Ozee, you know. I mean, you know, some of the things I've had to put up with him, you know, far worse than anything any guilter would do. But isn't it the case that as soon as you start calling people names, it's because you've lost the argument, you've lost the plot. It's now become a personal issue. You know, you're not dealing in the facts. You're just lashing out at somebody just because you don't like what they've just said. You know, the idea is that you come back with you know, some thoughts of your own rather than, you know, make it a personal issue. I mean, I've had, you know, personal abuse from all sorts of different people, and it doesn't bother me in the slightest. You know, yeah. I'm you know, I'm old enough and thick-skinned enough to not let it bother me in the slightest.
And they just want to get you off there. They're just hoping that they'll insult you enough that you will just give it up. And you're like, oh, I can't take this no more. They're getting at me personally and and doing all this. And a lot of people really don't have that thick skin, and they can't deal with it. And they take it seriously, you know, and they say, hey, well, I'm done with this. But you ain't going to do that to me. I'm sure they're not doing it to Paul. And I don't think they're going to do it to Andrew or anybody else that's fighting this like this, because they don't make no sense to none of us.
Well, what I think is funny is a lot of times these people, you know, regardless of what they believe, they don't really understand a lot of the facts. Like a lot of them was wanting to talk about the gun and the bullet, and well, how do you explain the bullet, you know, was proved to be fired out of that weapon? Well, and then I'll ask them, like, do you own guns? You know, whatever. No, I've never owned a gun. I've never shot a gun. I'm like, okay, well, 22 caliber rifle is a very low caliber bullet, and you can shoot it through wood, through different various items, and you can recover that bullet. So, for instance, if Steven shot a bullet through that garage at some point in time, that bullet's going to be laying in the garage. It's not going to go through this side of the garage all the way through the other side. It's going to be in that garage somewhere. And they just don't understand ballistics or the basic things that most people, you know, well, people in the country or people that own guns know about different weapons and stuff. So it's hard for them to believe, like, well, wait a minute. Her DNA was on the bullet that they found, and it was matched, the ballistics was matched to his gun. Then that's a shut case. They don't want to hear anything else.
Yeah,
the only slight problem there is that Pinocchio, yes, was made of wood. As far as we know, Teresa Holbach was not made of wood.
Right. And they don't. When you come back with that, they don't have anything to say. I mean, you know, sure, her DNA was on that bullet, but where did it come from? Isn't that a special thing from Mr. Pencil? Where did that DNA come from? I don't doubt it was hers. I don't. But where did it come from? They gave that away.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually sorry, Andrew, carry on.
Oh, I was just going to add one more thing because when she said that, it reminded me of something. Like Gene, I don't know how y'all pronounce the name, but in Louisiana, I would pronounce it Cachet. Well, like he said, you know that. I don't know that. DNA evidence has been manipulated before.
Yeah, so that says it all.
They say the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
That's where I take it from, his words. I mean, you know, let's use their own words. Okay, so that was very telling to me when he said that. When I heard that again, I was like, you know what? He just said it without really having to come out and make it be that way. He said it, and he was in deposition. So, Mr. Pencil, thank you very much for speaking for your friends.
Yeah, his surname does give trouble to some people. Some people say Couché, some people say Cush. Within the community, he's simply referred to as the Pencil.
I'm going to have to write that down.
Yeah, because when they say to him, you know, about the fact that, you know, you were just there to put in what was in Penny Bernstein's mind, he says, I was just the pencil.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Yeah, and so that's his nickname. One or two other interesting ones are obviously Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street, Wiegert and Fassbender,
Fassbender and Weigert.
Yeah, and obviously Brad Schimmel bears a striking resemblance to Homer Simpson. It's uncanny. And Norm Garn has got this very strange voice, often referred to as robot voice.
Which one is it?
Partly cloudy.
Norm Garn,
oh yeah, right.
Yeah, the one that wrote the statute on people in Wisconsin must not hand back biological evidence to the victim's family unless it's with the agreement of the person incarcerated. He wrote that, but
then he broke that.
Well, you know, did he do it accidentally? No, he knew exactly what he was doing. Of course they did, because they were right in the middle of the appeals on behalf of Brendan at the time, weren't they?
Yeah,
and they were right in the middle of appeals by Steve as well, who had been. I think in both cases, did they not get denied by the appeals at the appeals stage, and then the Supreme Court didn't want to look at either of those cases. They just rubber stamped what had gone on before them. Going back to the the bullets found in the bullet casings. Of course, we hear from Steve and Rowley Johnson that the reason there are bullet casings in the garage is because when they get fired outside, when they fire at stuff outside, the bullet casings ends up in the grass. And when you go along the grass with a grass cutter, it fires these shell casings like they're bullets themselves. So what he would do is he would find a handful of them and just throw them into the garage, for clearing up later on.
And then put them in a coffee can.
Well, yeah. You know, but I mean, to find these two bits of bullets, and to present this story that it was because, according to Ken Kratz, it was because of the specificity with which Brendan was able to direct everybody to the garage to tell them where to look, that they then found the bullet. Well, the only degree of specificity that Brendan ever gave was that he kept changing from garage to car to bedroom as being places where she was shot, you know. So he provided no specificity at all. But of course, that doesn't make for a good story, does it? On behalf of Ken Kratz, I was going to ask you though. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite sports is speedway, but probably not the way that it's known in America. In Britain, the speedway is done on dirt bikes, 500 cc's, one gear, no brakes, clutch start. So this is fantastic sport, great entertainment. I go and support the Berwick Bandits. I remember once I spoke to the promoter, the owner of Berwick Bandits, and he was saying that every time they have a meeting, Berwick must win. If Berwick were to have a meeting and lose, he would see a drop in about 500 supporters, people attending the next meeting. And I'm just wondering, what sort of pressures do you think a DA is under, particularly one that has been brought in from another county to prosecute a case for that county, when you consider what's on the line here?
You want to take that?
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I imagine that it has to be an enormous amount of pressure for any district attorney or law enforcement in general to quickly find the suspect and get them off of the streets.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I can't speak exactly because I've never been in law enforcement. I've never been an attorney or district attorney. I wish I was, but it's got to be an enormous amount of pressure. But even more so in this case, I mean, I would think that in this case particular, there would be, whatever is your normal amount of pressure to get a murderer off the street. This case would probably be times 10 if I had to guess. Yeah,
I agree. I think that, but you'd want to do it right. You'd want to make sure that it was right.
Ooh. Well, I
you got to play fair for that, but he doesn't play fair. He's been dirty from the get-go.
Yeah. Playing right is certainly not on Ken Kratz's radar. Right. Getting a conviction at all costs certainly are.
Right.
Certainly is that. That is exactly what it is. I can't help thinking that, not only is he a DA in his own county, but to be called in to prosecute something as high profile as this. I mean, you've only got to look at Ken Kratz trying to live off the fact that he was the one that prosecuted Stephen Avery years later. In all these emails to the DOJ when he's being investigated about the Sexton scandal, and he's telling them, how can the DOJ ever thank Ken Kratz for 25 years service, for being the guy that has offered unconditional support to the DOJ, which I think is a twofold thing. I think it's financial support to JB Van Hollen, who was the Attorney General at the time of the Sexton scandal, and I think unconditional support means doing whatever he needed to do to get a conviction.
Right.
And he's quoting constantly, he's on about the fact that I was the one that
he's the prize.
Stephen Avery. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the prize. Well, in meantime, he was popping pills and sexting, and how can you trust that? I'm surprised that they even have anything or allow him to talk at all, because he just makes Wisconsin look dirtier than dirt, even more with what he's done after that. We really don't know what he was doing while he was on that case. Was he popping pills? I mean, we don't know. He says he didn't.
I was going to say, I don't think he was popping pills at all. I think he took that from one of his cases. I think one of his victims that he sexted read about the fact that she was referring to exactly that kind of stuff, the fact that she was taking pills, and that made her the way she was. And I think he just took that as a convenient story, because even in the decision by the OLR, by the judge, I forget his name now, but he said that Ken Kratz has provided no evidence whatsoever of the fact that he was suffering any kind of mental condition.
And you got to keep in mind that Wisconsin works on, especially for the DA, they work on, if more convictions, the higher up you go, your paycheck gets bigger and you work up your way up. So there's profit in prison, and that's a big problem. They work for, they don't care if it's right or wrong. How many did you get in there? Oh gosh, you got 10 of them. We won't check them out if they ever got out or nothing, but you're going to go up in the pay scale and you're going to make your way up higher, be a judge or whatever, so I don't think that's right either. I don't think they should be paid for convictions.
Well, there was no way he was going to lose that case, that high profile case, his moment of real fame. There was no way he was going to lose that case.
Right.
In his mind.
Well, it was looking unsecure before Brendan's confession. That's why Brendan's confession was so important, because up until then, what had they got? They'd got these, the key and the bones and the car, but they all looked, even at the time, they looked. Although the press were reporting all this stuff, even the press was saying, well, this isn't really a lot to go on, because this looks highly dodgy,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the conflict of interest. That press conference has often been described, hasn't it, by Jerry, as if that had been a closing argument by Kratz, that would have been one of the greatest closing arguments ever delivered.
Right.
The fact was that it was downhill from that press conference. Ken Kratz was never able to corroborate any of what he said.
His sweaty words.
Yeah.
And that's why Judge Willis dropped the 3 additional charges on Stephen that stemmed from that coerced confession, because none of it could hold up in court. But then they turn right around and convict Brendan basically on this coerced confession with absolutely no physical evidence.
1 murder, 2 trials. One murderer and 2 trials convicted on the same body. How does that work? I mean, I don't get that. There's only one killer here.
Welcome to Wisconsin.
Yeah, 1 killer here, and that's Stephen Avery. Okay, but yet now you convict Brendan of the mutilation, rape, and murder. Okay, now, and Stephen got it for murder. Okay, I do not understand that line of thinking and how they allowed that. I mean, most DAs would say, nah, we can't do this. A decent, prosecuting attorney would look at this and say, this isn't going to work. There's something wrong here, but of course we are dealing with Wisconsin. We're dealing with Ken Kratz, biggest time in his life, the prize. Well, I don't want that prize. I would take a 50,000 booby prizes outside of that.
Andrew, what do you think of Vic Fussell?
Come again, Mr. Ball?
Have you seen the Confession Killer?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, right, sorry. I was going to say Vic Fussell was a prosecutor. He was a DA. If Ken Kratz had the minutest bit of Vic Fussell about him, it would have been so much better, because it would be questionable. Even Robert Herman agreed that the evidence against Steve was questionable to the extent whereby he, I said to him, well, how would you like to have been convicted on that kind of questionable evidence? And even he said, he agreed that, I wouldn't want that to happen. I can see where you're coming from, sort of thing, But even if Ken Kratz was had the tiniest little bit of Vic Fussell about him, a bit of genuine honesty about him, we would still be looking at the case and saying it doesn't make sense. But the fact that we know what sort of character Ken Kratz is, it just makes the situation so much worse, because you've got this character who just couldn't care less. I think he was under pressure being called in as the attorney from the neighbouring county. I think he would have been well briefed. I think he would have been well up to speed on the case. I have no doubt that Stephen Avery's civil suit, that would have been the talk of the law enforcement throughout Wisconsin, and certainly in Manitowoc and Calumet County. They would have been talking about that constantly, and all these sheriff's officers being called in to give these depositions. That would have been huge amongst the sheriff's department. So anyway, you mentioned Brendan. Let's just quickly move on. I've got a question that I'd like you both to consider. I'll preface the question by pointing out that I'm sure you've both found that amongst the truther community, there are some who have a sort of a warmer fondness towards Brendan, say, than Steve. You've even got some people who say Brendan's innocent, Steve's guilty. But you've also got some truthers that they definitely want the truth for Teresa Halbach. They definitely want to see Brendan out. They're a little bit sort of, yes, Steve wasn't this fantastic person even before the 1985 case. He's been in a long time. He's damaged goods. So my question would be this: looking at Brendan's petition for clemency, can you see a scenario in which Brendan being granted clemency by the governor could in some way be detrimental to Steve? Does that make sense? In other words, I suppose the bottom line is we're talking, if he doesn't get the full clemency, if it was a case of Evers came back and said, Drizzen Nyrider, come into my office, let's discuss this, and said, we'll do a deal. I'll let Brendan out, but you have to, in effect, forget about Steve. And the way we're going to do this is an Alford plea or something like that. Do you see that as being a scenario that might play out? Linda, your shot
okay.
first.
Yeah, I personally, if he took, I agree that a lot of people just want to get Brendan out and they don't care. They can fight his fight when he gets out, and I agree with that. He doesn't need to be where he's at, but I think it could be damaging to Stephen if he did take an Alford plea, because that's admitting that this all happened, and then they have to go, and Zellner would have to fight that too. I think it could be damaging. I don't really know the legal things of it, but I do think that could be damaging in the eyes of the court, saying, oh, well, he's saying, he took this plea, so he's saying this stuff happened, but we're letting him out because, he's young, this, whatever he was, whatever their reasons would be. So yeah, I think it could be damaging to Stephen for that purpose. If he was to admit guilt, and that's an Alford plea, I'm admitting I'm guilty, or, I'm not saying I'm guilty, but I'm guilty. I don't know how that really works, but it's guilty, not guilty at the same time. I think it could be damaging.
Andrew?
I think, similar to what she just said, I really think Brendan needs to get out of prison really at all costs, because even though it would be damaging to Steve if he took what y'all are calling an Alford plea, I guess. I'm not up to date with exactly what that is. But however, even if it did look damaging to Steve, if Kathleen comes up with exculpatory evidence, she could still get, evidentiary hearing or a new trial for Steve. I don't think that letting Brendan out and taking that plea would be like, okay, Stephen can never get out now. So I kind of would agree that any step in the right direction would be a good step to take, you know. But I don't personally think he's going to do it, and it's actually shocking that Tony Evers would not,
Right.
you know, even it seemed to me like he didn't even really consider it,
Right.
you know. And to me, I mean, I don't know polling information in Wisconsin, but I'm assuming that it'd be an unpopular thing to do, and that's why it got shot down. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and an Alford plea was what Mike Peterson eventually went for, even though at one point he could have he could have pursued his rightful claim to being innocent, but in the end it was decided to go for this Alford plea. I've tried to explain this to retired police commissioners, heads of police. And they have shaken their head in disbelief when I've told them, you know, what this Alford plea is. It is the biggest fudge you can ever think of, because it's basically saying that I accept the fact that had this gone to trial, the state could have found me guilty. I could have been found guilty. Mm-hmm. Well, then go to trial, have a proper trial, but make sure it's a proper trial with proper evidence. You mentioned the word this exculpatory evidence. I'm coming across this word time and time again, and isn't it strange? Isn't it bizarre that the investigators who investigate this case are so leaning towards the prosecutor that you end up with this bizarre situation where the prosecutor can decide whether what they've discovered should be shared with the defense. That should have nothing at all to do with the district attorney. It should just be a case of everything that's been discovered should be shared with everybody. Yeah. It's not for them to decide beforehand what would or would not make a difference. It just beggars belief.
There's got to be a Brady violation, huh?
Yeah. How many more does she need? I mean, I'm sorry, just Manitowoc police being involved, that is conflict of interest. I agree 100% when Andrew said that on his video. It is, you should have been done right there. Yep. Okay, but they did go further. And I kind of have to say on it could damage Stephen. Yes, it might damage Stephen in some way. It might make Zellner fight harder, but I think she has enough exculpatory evidence to have this just thrown out. But they're not even letting her see it. They're not even looking at it. They're just thinking of any way they can say no.
Yeah. Basically, it allows the defendant to maintain their innocence while pleading a plea of guilty.
Yeah.
In other words, they're not sure.
They're saying they're innocent of the crime, but the courts might find them guilty. That's what I think it means in the long and short. But still, I mean, Brendan doesn't need to be there, and I don't care how he gets out. If they get him out, that's great. I'm all for any way they can get that boy out, that man now. He does not need to be there. It's a total kidnapping, like Stephen says. We're just kidnapped, and yes, they are. Stephen has enough evidence where Brendan has no evidence or DNA or anything they can do. It's all his words that they fed him, and I say it a million times. I'll say it again. When you watch that confession, if you're of sound mind, if you have one brain cell in your head that tells you right or wrong, well, it better be telling you that's wrong, because either that or you are just plain dumber than a rock. And, you shouldn't even be in somebody's garden. Get out of here. I just do not understand that. It does not take a brain surgeon to see that poor kid was totally coerced, not even digging into anything like I have, just watching it. I remember how I felt just watching it. I was like, this cannot be real. No way. They're not going to put this kid in jail. That stuff, they are telling him everything. I was getting so mad, throwing things at the TV, man. Before I found all you, I was going crazy. So I had nobody to talk to. Nobody wanted to hear this stuff from here. I live in Minnesota. Wisconsin's right next door. We used to go party there. Nobody wants to hear about this stuff. They're like, shut up. Yep. So, unless they watched it and feel the same passion that we all do, it's hard to talk about.
Well, it's got to be troubling that in any case where the only answer that they will accept from him is the one that they want to hear. Anything aside from that, they just say that he's lying or he's not being honest or whatever. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, we all know how many times he said, I don't know, or, whatever. He was fed.
I didn't think of it.
That
kills me. I didn't think of it.
Yep, I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, that one word right there when he says, well, why didn't you tell us, Brendan? Well, I couldn't think of it.
Yeah.
Well, come on. Now, he's obviously saying, well, unless you give me them words, I'm not going to say it. Because even in his phone calls to his mom, which, by the way, the phone call's excellent to listen to, he says, well, he said he knew everything. He just wanted me to have it come out of my mouth.
Yep.
I mean, and then taking the educational, his understanding of just his schooling. It really was a eye opener for me to hear that Brendan used to have a person sit next to him, a teacher, and explain to him what the main teacher was telling him. He had to have that explained. So now think about that for a minute. If he can't understand what a teacher is trying to teach him, how is he going to know anything against these two, professional detectives? They don't even consider that.
Highly trained interrogators.
Right.
And I've been saying for weeks that I don't see how it was ever allowed, his confession to stand up in court. He clearly, if anything else, if you was a person that thought, well, I think everything he's saying is true, there's no way you can deny he did not understand what he was confessing to.
No.
I mean, he thinks he's about to go back to school and turn in a project. He thinks he's about to be arrested for one day. And then on the phone call, one of the phone calls with his mom, he's talking about wanting to be out to watch WrestleMania. I'm like, dude, he does not understand what he has confessed to.
No, I have no understanding of it. In the phone calls, you hear Barb saying, oh, Brendan wants to come home. Brendan wants to come. He's constantly thinking he's going to come home. He did what he thought they wanted him to do, and he thought he was cooperating and doing a good thing. He had no idea the words he was saying was going to send him to prison for the rest of his life and change his complete world. Absolutely not. That boy would rather be sitting in front of a PlayStation playing games. He don't care. You know what I'm saying? He just was trying to be a good person, I mean, you can tell that's all he was trying to do was just get done with it. It's just sad. It's sad all the way around that they accept this. And that's why I'm just going to keep talking about it because it's wrong. It goes on everywhere. But Brendan is the saddest case I've ever heard.
One of the things that sort of struck me was that right at the end of the so-called confession, when Brendan says, what if his story is different? What if Stephen's story is different? Although Regan Fassbender, they keep telling him, we know it, we just need it coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
He must have picked up on the fact that, they're saying that's not what we're thinking. Now we believe you. He must have picked up on the fact that there was clearly, it was a case of him having to try and give them some information. But did he not also think right at the end there, they're going to go and they're going to check out this that I've told them, and we hear about the fact that in class, Brendan guesses at stuff, and the thing is, if you're in class and you guess at something, then along comes the teacher and says, "No, you've got that wrong. This is the answer." Was it a case of Brendan is immediately thinking, well, they're going to go and check, and they're going to find out that everything I've said is or agree to is wrong? That would be my take of his. What if he says that his story is different?
Yeah. He says, "What do you just like you said? What if Stephen's story is different?" And Barb says, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, like I don't know, like I didn't do nothing or something."
Yeah.
So you see what I'm saying? I mean that's a really good point, Mr. Paul. That it just proves even further that he even after he just confessed, he still
Questioning.
Yeah, he don't even know. He probably couldn't have told you what he just confessed to after he confessed to it.
Right.
Absolutely.
He probably couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
He doesn't see it as a confession. He sees it as him having guessed some things.
Yeah.
And they're going to go away. They're going to check.
They're telling him the right thing
to see if it adds up, and they're going to come back and say to him, Brendan, none of what you've said is correct. That's right. What should have happened. But yeah. Now I was going to ask you about the obviously the petition for clemency. Why do you think that Governor Evers took so long to consider? Took a couple of months to think about it, and then just basically gave a reply that he could have given within 2 minutes of receiving the petition.
To look good. I don't think he even looked at it. I don't think it even went to his desk. I think they stopped it before it even went there. And then if they didn't, when he does it, they throw it at him and go, "Oh, we read through this. You don't want to do this. It's not going to be good for your career." Something,
Right.
And just filled out the basic thing. That was it. I don't think he looked at it, because if you want, I have never, and I don't understand why they don't have this in their head. There are 250 professional, very experts. Okay. I mean, you have, Waxman, I think that's his last name, that attorney. How many? I mean, come on. The guy went to the Supreme Court how many times? 4 times. He was going to go for Brendan. They don't take anything he says as to be, good by his word. Okay, how about the psychiatrist and, the psychologist and all these? I mean, there's too many people with very professional names that are putting it on this. Now, they're not going to do that for no reason. I mean, they have to wholeheartedly believe this and see this. Why don't they look at that? That's what makes me so frustrated in this case, is that they're not looking at what they're presenting. They're just bottom lining it. He's guilty. That's it. We don't care what anybody says. And that's not fair.
Yeah. And I honestly believe that the governor isn't going to do something just because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He's going to see which way the wind's blowing. He's going to want to get a feel of how this is going to affect him politically.
Yeah.
And if I had to guess without looking at polling data in Wisconsin, if I had to guess, there would be more people of the social status of Teresa Halbach than there is a Brendan Dassey. So just without looking at polling data, I would guess that it's be a very unpopular decision for him to release Brendan Dassey. And he might, he might in his mind be worried about, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I let him out and he does something, but it all stems from political blowback to me. And that's the reason why it got denied.
Yeah, I would give Tony Evers the benefit of the doubt and suggest that the reason that Steve and Laura are repetitioning is because they must have felt somewhat encouraged by the fact that it did take so long. Otherwise, why just immediately repetition? And when you look through that petition, there was some interesting observations about Willis, wasn't there? Judge Willis in Steve's trial, having sort of put aside some documents about it that Eric Jose and Travis went through and discussed yesterday, or the day before, when they actually looked at the petition for clemency, and I thought that was very, very interesting. I like this comment though. I understand Kathleen Zellner being politically correct, saying Judge Fox wasn't corrupt, and I think we can apply that to Willis as well. While he is as corrupt as we get, yep. He allowed the testimony. He blocked defense all the way. Same with Elmer Fudd. I like that Elmer Fudd.
Elmer Fudd.
Steve's case.
And I have to tend to agree with Michelle. She says it would be, political assassination for this
Suicide,
governor. It would be just, the end of his career. And that is what they look at. You have to look at what was he saying when he was up for vote? Okay. What was his stand on? He was strong on crime. Okay. But he's an educator. So you think, like Laura Nyrayer said, that he would be, a little bit more lenient towards Brendan, understanding that he comes from a background of education and he knows how students are and their struggles and this and that. But believe me, it takes a lot to run for a governor, and you've got to get the people to stand behind you. And if they are people that believe Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are guilty, and that's the most of his votes, he's going to tend to stay on that side, because he doesn't want to lose his career. But he also doesn't look at it as, you're setting a precedent there. You could really make a big difference in the justice system if you did this. He doesn't look at that positive. He just thinks, I'm going to lose some voters. You might gain a whole hell of a lot of voters by doing the right thing. You might make your career be the best in history because you took a stand on something that was wrong and you made it right. He doesn't think like that. He just thinks about the numbers, and that's all it is for them people. I believe that, because if they lead with their heart a little bit, they would be letting them out. If they even lead with their mind and look at the evidence, they would go in Brendan's favor.
Yeah, I've always believed though, and I'm still of the opinion that SCOTUS had the opportunity to do something good, and they were afraid to. Yeah. They were not. They were cowards, and I think it really is, as I felt all along. It's going to be a case of Kathleen Zellner pursuing this case on behalf of Steve, that it is eventually going to bring everything down. This is an interesting comment from Rule, and I'm sure we Rule, yes, with our Danish friend from Denmark, or is it Netherlands? Yes. So what we've got is, in May, he couldn't remember what he confessed to in March. Of course, the whole point of this confession was all about trying to get Brendan to take a plea bargain, wasn't it? I would hope that not having taken the plea bargain when it was offered to him in 06, 07. I think they took the plea bargain back, didn't they? Just after that, the May 13th interrogation, didn't they? And the interview. I think that's when they withdrew the plea bargain. When Kaczynski was no longer part of Brendan's case, the plea bargain was out of the window. That was their reasoning. I think this is the reason why, you've got Ken Kratz saying, we should maybe have a look at Brendan's sentence. He's maybe done long enough. His crime being not accepting a plea bargain.
Yeah. Did you just say Ken Kratz said that?
Yeah, Ken Kratz in his book in his latest book has said that, and he even in an email to Fallon requesting the reservation of seats for him and Tom Fassbender at the initial Seventh Circuit hearing. We know the date. It was Valentine's Day of 2017.
Huh?
Is that about right? 2017, or was it 2018? But anyway, it was at that. In leading up to that, it's Ken Kratz that actually emails Tom Fallon to say that maybe they should have a look at Brendan's situation, and the correct term was an adjustment of the sentence. And I find that fascinating. I even contacted Steve Drizzen and asked him what was meant by this, and he said, "Where did you get this from?" And I said, "I got it from this site on Reddit. Here's the link." So it was actually me that alerted Steve Drizzen to this email that Ken Kratz had sent to Tom Fallon, obviously before they did the petition. But it was Steve that said, no, it would not be a case of, because I said, is he trying to say that Brendan's sentence be extended? He said, oh, no, it's to do with reducing it.
Well, then he recanted that anyway. He said that he's guilty. Look at the videos he put out. And he added the extra 2, chapters to his piece of crap book,
Yeah.
I mean, so he doesn't know which way is he standing. You know what I'm saying? Was he going to go nice and say, hey, well, let's really do this and then stick by it? No, he just wanted to make some stir up and then, goes and takes it back and says that he really, he's really guilty.
Yeah. But in that case, then, do you think that Ken Kratz would be quite happy if Brendan was let out on an Alford plea?
I don't think Ken Kratz would be happy at all if either of them get out. I think he'd be totally.
But why would he? Why would he in that email then?
That's what I mean. I don't understand his thinking. I don't get I don't know if it was guilt for a minute.
I think to me, here's the cynic in me thinking, and I've felt this all along, that because you've got Steve and Brendan, and you've got some people who are, as I say, they are more interested, concerned with Brendan than they are with Steve and Avery, that somehow some sort of fudge would occur whereby the bottom line being the state and the truther movement, let's call it a draw. We'll give you Brendan Dassey. We'll keep Steve and Avery. And let that be it. That's always been one of my, if you like, concerns. Is that at some point they will try and come up with some sort of fudge in this, and not do the kind of research that needs to be done. I mean, for me, once Steve and Brendan are out and exonerated, what sort of investigation should be done of Manitrek Sheriff's Department, Calumet Sheriff's Department, Calumet District Attorney's Office, the Manitrok District Attorney's Office, everybody in the food chain going all the way up to Peg Leixelager? What sort of investigation should be done of all of these officials?
I think the United States Department of Justice should, or the United States Attorney General, that office, not anything from Wisconsin. I think the Fed investigate every single one of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Find out exactly the truth.
Yeah,
100%.
And I think we're finding out with all of these cases, and isn't it fascinating that we've now got this footage of, for example, Henry Lee Lucas case, all these other cases that there's just so much wrong with it that it needed something like Making a Murderer, which is so popular. What is it? 40 million people throughout the world.
The #1 documentary ever on Netflix.
It needed something like this to finally bring it out in the open and make it so big that instead of just being looked at, as you say, Andrew, at a local level, it needs to be brought to the attention of everybody. I believe that's when it becomes a federal case and the FBI would go in and have a look at it.
But isn't that a problem because they don't mess with state issues or state convictions?
Well, they do if there's an issue of corruption.
Yeah.
But then they go by their DOJ or DOG and all them people that, like when Peg Lottenschlager did her little thing about Steven, nobody was guilty. It was just a simple accident. So they look at that too. So if somebody up here is saying there's nothing going on, they're not going to take it upon themselves to go there. There's other steps. And it just is impossible, it seems like, to get somebody who really would look at this and say, okay, we're not involved in this. We can look at this biasly. We don't have no, what I mean? And really take a look at it. That is the problem. Why? My question is, why hasn't anybody just jumped on this? Why hasn't a lawyer taken it somewhere to them? Or can't they do it? I don't understand that. That would be a legal question for Travis. I don't know where they can step in.
If I'm not mistaken, now I could be wrong, depending on what states, different states have laws. But see, if you start digging in and you start investigating all these prosecutors and investigators, and you find out that they have committed all these different crimes or things that wasn't right, well, then all of the people they prosecuted would be, if I'm not mistaken, eligible for new trials. You know what I'm saying? Because I have seen and read about that where these prosecutors have been found guilty of doing this or doing that, and now you have all these petitions from prisoners that's been put in prison by these people. And so, I mean, that could play a part in it too.
But how do you get them to say they were corrupt? That's just it. How do you get people to say, oh, well, he did this, and then get, the other people to take a look and say, oh, yeah, okay, he is corrupt. He did do this. How do they? It's such an intertwined buddy brotherhood kind of thing that nobody talks, I mean, everybody says it had to be the whole police department to do this. No, it didn't. And a couple of them could have did it, and their brothers are just going to say, okay, well, he's a stand-up guy. He's really good. I'm going on. I'm going to back my brother. Well, so how do you get enough attention to prove them guys are wrong? Because we all know they're corrupt. We do.
I don't understand that theory about, well, you would have to have all these law enforcement officials to be in on it. Well, they were in 1985.
Right.
I mean, if you look at all the people that is reasonably believed to have known that Stephen Avery was innocent, I mean, that's a pretty long list.
Yeah.
From the Tom Kasurik, Gene Cachet, Andy Colburn, Link Peterson. I mean, they all knew, in my opinion, they all knew Stephen Avery was innocent. And then the DCI investigates them, and then they noted all of the problems in the sheriff's department and all of the problems in that case. And then when they turned it over to the attorney general in Wisconsin, she says, oh, there's no wrongdoing. That's why I said I think we'd have a better chance if the feds looked at it as opposed to Wisconsin. But you're right. That still doesn't guarantee that anything will be done about it.
Because it's obvious that they were guilty of doing this in 1985, okay? And then now this trial, and you're finding out all these things. You think that would be enough to get the attention of them. But it hasn't. And that is where I am just at a brick wall. I do not understand that legal part of it. Because it has to go right now. I mean, no matter what we find, it still has to go to court. It still has to be able to be in court to look at it. Kathleen's got to get in there and be able to present this, and they're, blocking her. So how do you get somebody, if they're blocking an attorney from getting the courts to even look at the evidence, how are you going to get feds to look at the prosecutors of this case? It's just mind boggling to me because, like I said, if you got one brain cell in your head, you could figure this out. It's not right. It needs to be looked at. And these people are professionals. They do this. It's the same with their, the Manitowoc police making the dates wrong on things and things like that. This is your job. Your job depends. People's lives depend on you having the time, the date, the place, the person correct. And you're not doing that. So in your job description, did it lack of that? Did it lack of you writing reports on time and making sure the dates were right and the person was right? Because I just seen a paper that was saying that the alien, I don't know how to say the kid's name or the officer's name, but the one that said aliens could have did it. He was the one
Daniel Kuczarski.
Yeah, Millbilly just presented it last night where it says he found the key on the 7th. Okay, now wait a minute here. That's way different than what we've seen in court, and it's way. You know what I mean? There is evidence of their own writings and out of their own mouth, but yet nobody up high is taking a look at this. What is it going to take? You know what I mean? I don't understand it. That's a question for a lawyer, I guess, to ask. They would know the legal procedure of it. But it's dry. It's mind-boggling. It's just, I want to go up and shake up the federal buildings and say, "Hey, man, you need to get down here." I want to say, "You got a brain cell in your head? How'd you get this job, man? They'll tell you something. There's something going on down in Wisconsin. You need to check it out." Okay, but nobody's doing it. I mean, it's frustrating.
For me, Murder in the Park is a good example of, and the reason why Ken Kratz applauds it so much is because it was an example of investigative journalism going way too far. You know, it was just bizarre.
Yeah.
And the fact that they released Anthony Porter and arrested Old Story Simon on this clearly coerced confession, and they did it without even corroborating any of what Old Story Simon did. They were just taken along on this sort of tidal wave of we have to be seen to be doing something. And I'll give you another example, although you've not watched it. Vic Fazell is treated just as badly by this stupid Channel 8 News, who do this series of articles. They play it to a grand jury of whatever in Austin, who then indict him on these 12 charges. And so, in other words, it was trial and jury and conviction by media. And that's one thing that we don't want in this case, making a murderer. We don't want it to be whereby, you know, we as in supporters of the truth of the truth are making that much of a difference that they're just going to let Stephen Brendan go just because we don't like what's going on. We want to see Stephen Brendan. I want to
see a trial.
But what we want to do is we want to see a process whereby they're exonerated, they're proven innocent. Hopefully the correct perpetrators are targeted. And then for me, there has to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be a case of wagging fingers and trying to put people away. It's got to be a certain amount of, like they did in South Africa following the getting rid of apartheid. They called it truth and reconciliation. And I think this is going to have to be the way that they're going to go. They're going to have to get people in who are potentially not going to be facing charges to just come in and tell the truth as to what actually happened. So yeah, if it was the FBI, yes, I think they could be called in to look at it because they are, you know, that's their job, isn't it, to investigate any kind of corruption in the, you know, they can go to Wisconsin and be very heavy-handed about it.
Well, they need to get that integrity. Is that what it's called? Integrity. What is it called?
Conviction integrity units.
Right. I mean, I believe that every state should have that. You know, they really should have that. I mean, because that is helping a lot of other things, and it would help, you know, keep the corruption down and maybe somebody to turn to like this. Because see, now we don't have nobody to turn to have them investigated. There's nobody there to do that.
Now, Andrew, it's I don't know what time it is over there for you in Albany.
6 o'clock.
I was going to say 6 o'clock. I would say
same time.
That in yes, you see, at the same time in Minnesota. It is now midnight for me. So I'm gonna thank both of you for coming on and having a chat with me, and hopefully we'll get you on again pretty soon. I've got some questions. I've got some questions for obviously for Tracy, who hopefully will be joining me around about, I think it's around about 10 o'clock tomorrow night, but with it being like 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne, which would be my 10 o'clock is your 4 o'clock. Or if you live anywhere near Crunch Island, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't know if the dude is gonna manage to join us, but
and hopefully I can work something out with Andrew, and he can come on my channel too.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting is to see what see how you get on with the Guilters in this in the Guilter community. It's just one of these things whereby I always laugh at the fact that Guilters seem to think that we are so important that we are going to end up being like a murder in a park because of our protestations. We're going to get Stephen Brendan released. It ain't going to happen that way, you know. No. And so why are they so insistent upon trying to tell us that we've got it wrong when we haven't. But why do they descend into name calling and sometimes far worse? Because they haven't got a leg to stand on. Because
they don't want us to talk.
They are irrelevant now.
Yeah. You're doing great, Andrew. You keep handling them way you have. I like that. I tell you, you got that go get them. It's just like me. I don't care what I'm saying, but it's getting out there.
Absolutely. You're doing a grand job there, Andrew.
That's right. And they just want to shut you up. So you just know that and keep on going, because you're obviously doing something right. If you got guilties on you, and I've been in this about 2.5 years now, and I haven't had that problem. So you must be doing it right, and I must be taking some lessons here.
Okay. Well, you know the routine by now. If you two could just say it's goodbye from me and goodbye from me, then I can just say it's goodbye from them.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them. Bye-bye. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.